So Tomi Lahren's an interesting character. Let me do the introduction again. We'll try to turn this into a segment, see if it's good content. So my name's Connor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran. I am running the channel at Counterpoints and Counterpoints 40K. We are a part of the Valor Media Network, which is a network that's trying to espouse positive masculinity, or at least make fun of all the people who espouse negative masculinity. Piers Morgan is a former tabloid news journalist, but he did make a name for himself in tabloids and in news and in Good Morning Britain. He started his own show called Piers Morgan Uncensored, which was originally on a TV channel and then got moved onto YouTube. He has hosted panels with mainstream media and alternative media persons, and we have two people that we know on this panel. One of them is Tomi Lahren, who is, I don't want to say disgraced, but a formerly very popular conservative pundit who took a lot of flack for stating that she was going to be pro-abortion because she viewed it as a libertarian issue. Then we have Andrew Wilson, who is somebody who I have debated multiple times, who has become a small kingpin, a small lord in the world of red pill, because he goes on to podcasts and calls women stupid for prolonged periods of time. So we're going to go ahead and watch this panel show run by Piers and see if there's any interesting meat on the bone. Let's check it out.
Well, The Guardian summed up the general tone of the reporting with a headline that said, from the police to the Prime Minister, how adolescence is making Britain face up to toxic masculinity. But is it really? Can it not just be a successful drama that references popular culture, as so many do? Critics of the show say it's another version of the same man-bashing narrative that gave rise to the so-called manosphere in the first place. Well, here to debate all this is the host of The Crucible, Andrew Wilson, the radio host, James Barr, the host of Tomi Lahren is Fearless on Outkick, Tomi Lahren, and the host of The Determined Society, Sean French. Welcome to all of you. Andrew Wilson, let me start with you, because look, I've got three sons, 31, 27, 24. I think I brought them up to respect women, to not behave in a misogynist way, and to behave in a pretty decent way generally. But I'm also aware that they've grown up in an era when the likes of Andrew Tate and others have become increasingly dominant in the way that a lot of impressionable young men start to think and view women. And for all that Andrew Tate can say that is positive about getting fit and being successful and confident and so on, there's indisputably a hardcore streak of misogyny that runs through his veins, which I think has been quite damaging to young men. So I'm not all in either way here, but I can certainly see the arguments. Where do you sit?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that so I watched the show, and it just goes through a typical feminine view, right? So all of these things are always through the prism of the feminine. So young boys, they don't do well in school. They don't do well in school because it's all programmed for the feminine. Stay still, fold your hands, right? Be quiet. Boys are rambunctious. They like to beat each other up. They like to be mischievous. They like to break things. They like to do that kind of stuff. There's no outlet for them to do that stuff. Their teachers are all women, right? There's basically all masculinity is now considered toxic, basically all of it. The same women who are getting their double shot of espresso on the way over to the school they're about to teach at, they're 24 years old. Sometimes they're banging their own students, right? Hilariously enough. And then these people go out to Parliament. The same women will go to Parliament. They vote to send men off to war to stab each other in the face with bayonets. And you're concerned about toxic masculinity. It cracks me up. It's like the brutal savagery of men is a necessary precondition for society to exist. And we just kind of pretend like it's not. And this show should actually be an indictment on the feminine rather than the masculine, because basically masculinity is just punished everywhere all the time, nonstop. It's no wonder guys like Andrew Tate get so famous in these spaces. I mean, what's the alternative? The alternative is everything must be feminine, tone policing, nonsense like this. It's ridiculous.
All right.
Whoa. Yeah. Trump just announced we need an open border. Check Midas Touch Network. Listen, we already started a piece of content, but I'll check that out. That sounds absolutely insane. So hold on. Let's deal with what Andrew was actually saying. So Adolescence, the TV show, is written through the prism of the feminine. I would not be surprised if it has like female-centric stereotypes around what like men and masculinity are, where it's like a young boy and he's being vaguely threatening and he's being aggressive and he's doing this and he's doing that and he's trying bullying, but it's not really working. So he's getting bullied back, all that kind of stuff. Whereas I think a masculine centered story about adolescence and violence and incorrect violence would probably be told through the prism of how do you do violence justly, particularly like an American perspective. From an American perspective, we have all sorts of stories from like a bullied kid's perspective, where eventually he does get the girl, he does learn how to fight, he does learn how to stand up for himself, et cetera, et cetera. And so we would have these like pro-masculine but still violent stories about how how boys become men through coming of age, through physical competence, through martial contest, et cetera, et cetera. Just think Karate Kid, right? Karate Kid, I would say, is probably pro-masculinity. And so, yeah, those stories should be told that way. Men, kind of young boys, have a prism through which to view their own masculinity that is positive. Whereas this seems to be a story about, a boy who goes the wrong way. All female teachers. This is a real problem. But I'm curious as to what Andrew would say the solution is. My solution would be we should put incentives for men in order to be teachers more often. We should put in incentives for men to become administrators, deans, disciplinarians, PE coaches, et cetera, because my understanding is that right now it's like a 10-to-1 ratio in education in the Americas for females to men. And then of course, some of those men are going to be gay as well. That's not an indictment. That's just a statement that not all of them are going to be cis, het, white, straight, strong bodybuilders. A lot of them are probably going to be feminine as well, or homosexual, or, not culturally tied into the next generation. Right. Banging their own students, I think, has nothing to do with it. I literally think it's a throwaway line just to say that women are bad too. And then vote to send men to war to stab each other in the face with bayonets. This is a red pill talking point that I've encountered a couple of times now, where women are disproportionately voting to be involved in conflicts that they themselves do not have to be involved in. I think it's just another jab at women. I don't think it's necessarily pertinent to the conversation. I do believe that violence is a necessary precondition for society, but restrained violence is also how we maintain a coherent society. So just saying that, like, yeah, boys can be violent, no big deal, it doesn't matter, it's a part of our natural DNA. I think that is toxic, so to speak. So yeah. Let's see what everybody else has to say. Yeah, Christian Valeris, I agree. So Christian Valeris says feminism is more involved with education, therefore Andrew Tate is not a problem. Yeah, it's a non sequitur.
James Barr, you were laughing, but I don't think I'd enjoy
crazy.
What you're hearing.
No, I mean, I don't think you've seen the show. Episode 2 is shot entirely in a school. I didn't see one of the female teachers drinking a double shot of espresso at all. None of the teachers were flirting with students. There were male teachers as well. I don't think you're describing the show here. I think you're describing your own insecurities or agenda.
Describing reality.
This doesn't contend with the argument. Like, do you understand that I'm making an argument, the indictment of society itself, based around my ideas that I'm seeing from this show? That's what I'm actually doing. So if you could contend with the fact that male savagery is necessary for the security of a nation, and that women...
Well, QC John says nothing can change until the education system can accept that boys are not broken girls. I agree. What I would do if I were to reform education, I of course would want more male teachers, more male administrators, more deans, more disciplinarians, etc. But I also think that the day should be broken up by multiple windows of physical activity, not just PE or like once or physical education, right? Not just PE or recess, like 2.5 times per day. I do think like probably every 2 hours or so, there should be some level of either recess or PE. I would not be surprised if my school system, my kid's school system, actually does do that already. I would just be curious what other solutions Andrew would suggest. There's the stereotypical and obvious ones, like adding shop class, like adding some kind of like construction and destructive classes, some mechanical classes, that kind of stuff. Engineering, I would all be for that. Also agriculture. There's some magnet agriculture schools around me that start in high school, and kids are charged with building and taking care of gardens and farms and livestock. So all those are being done to greater and lesser degrees in my community. I just don't know how intentional it was. There was a lot of ale, indeed.
Will indeed vote in the future in parliaments to send men off to war to stab each other in the face at 18 years old with bayonets. Perhaps you can contend with that before we start, getting into, well, tone policing is actually good and toxic masculinity is actually bad. It's like, I think there needs to be a little bit more toxic masculinity, or what you consider to be toxic masculinity.
Well, great. Good for you.
Nothing.
I'm glad you think so.
Nothing.
No, I mean, I just don't need to argue with that because
you just unlocked. You just unlocked. You got nothing.
You're making up.
You
an
do
agenda
seem
that
unusually
I've not said
by that.
I've not said anything. I haven't literally said nothing about.
James, you were literally
toxic masculinity
rendered silent.
at all,
Like you had no way of responding.
I'll tell you what, you can't argue with a completely illogical argument that had, like, I've not made any.
It's a logical argument. You may not agree with it.
I've not made any of the comments
logical argument
that you were firing at me. None of those comments are things I've said or believe in.
All right, I want to bring Tomi in because, Tomi, you've got a very interesting perspective, I think. You've talked about something different. You call it the pussification of men, which is a great phrase. I'd love you to just explain what you mean by that. But also, you're not a fan of Andrew Tate or the influence he has. So that makes you, I think, an interesting commentator in this area. So just explain, first of all, the pussification of men.
All right, Piers. Well, I think, and I can't see you all, so forgive me if I'm incorrect here, but I think I'm the only female on this panel.
Correct.
So I'm really anxious to weigh in. Okay. So I think over the last probably 10 years, there has been what I call the pussification of men. It was everything should be about your emotions and your feelings, and men were emasculated, and this whole concept of toxic masculinity warped the minds of a lot of young men, and they felt masculine. They wanted to be masculine, but society was telling them they should be softer, that it was being toxically masculine if you wanted to play sports and chop wood and go to war. And so men were so emasculated and so beat down that then there was this revolution of what was actually toxic masculinity, the Tate brothers and others, which I feel as a female that doesn't represent true masculinity. That to me represents douchebaggery. And as a woman, I want a strong man who is a protector and a provider that will go to war if need be, that will protect me, protect my family, make money. I see that as being actually masculine. That's like the man that I grew up with, my dad. But what we're seeing now is these young men who look at Andrew Tate and the Tate brothers, and they see somebody who's just quite frankly a douchebag and disrespects women. And because they've been so emasculated, they're like, oh, great, that's a manly man. But that's not right either. So at some point, I think we'll go back to maybe meeting in the middle here. You can be a man who has feelings and emotions, but you can also go to war and protect and defend your family. I'm hoping we can get back there. But the two extremes right now, they're confusing men. And quite frankly, they're leaving women with few choices. And that's the real tragedy here.
You see,
okay. Classic woman move, making it about herself, is that the crisis of masculinity is leaving women with too few choices. Classic female move. We're talking about men and you make it about yourself. However, does that mean she's wrong though? I don't know. I don't think she's wrong at all. I think she's absolutely right that within the past, this has been going on for longer than that, right? There was like the metrosexual fad in the thousands. There were pushes for men to be more feminine the entire time. There was Sex in the City and all sorts of different, I would say like social programs for women where they were telling women what kind of men they wanted. And oftentimes those men were more sophisticated than the barbarians that we have today, right? But she's saying that the feminine expectations of a feminine man, the feminized stereotypes of what a man should be, or the giga douchebag. I think that's the perfect word for it. When I was growing up, Andrew Tate would be a douchebag. Because there wasn't as much social media, he wouldn't be able to be relevant on social media, and there wouldn't be the internet for him to be able to pimp out girls in order to make millions of dollars. So he would literally be a kickboxing douchebag, spending all his money on liquor at a local club, fist bumping to techno, and that would have been Andrew Tate. He wouldn't have been a popular media figure. And so as a result, he's effectively he's turned the archetype of the douchebag into a consumable brand. And I think that's like a spot on analysis. I also agree with her that the truth is in the middle somewhere. Men should 100% be able to protect themselves, protect their families, and provide economically. And by the way, if you have like a dual income household, that's not a knock on anybody, but the man or men in general should wake up and they should put 40 hours of effort a week at minimum into making sure that their family is financially and physically secure. That's it. And so that is not the hyper feminine, emasculated wimp of a man. And that's not the Andrew Tate sex pest, rapist, sex trafficking douchebag. That's in the middle. I think Tomi's assessment was perfect, except for the very last statement where she made it about herself, which is something that women can often be accused of. So, Silver Jacket Man says, maybe it's changed a lot since I was a kid, or since I was a millennial, but I was a kid. We still got into fights. Me too. Had shop class. Me too, up till middle school. We didn't have shop class in high school. Upper class neighborhood in a blue state too. Well, good. I'm happy that was like that. Now we gotta pray that the next generation still has some of those influences. Eon Flux says, I despise that woman. Well, me too, but that doesn't mean that she said anything wrong. So you're gonna have to point out something that she said wrong. Joda Boy says, guys dress gay as hell in the 80s. That's true. Hair metal was a thing. That was gay as hell. Well, QC John says she's not wrong, but does feel out of place for the discussion being had. I agree. She's a pretty gal, kind of bimbo-y or whatever, but I don't necessarily like to say that somebody is out of place in an argument unless they're making poor arguments. And so far that argument was perfectly fine. Yakov says, I took home ed because that's where the girls were. Never took shop. Oh, you took home ec. I gotcha. Good point. I see I'm not the only one that did that then. Lol. Douchebag was a brand that was pushed in the 2000s, new metal stuff. So on. Not only an internet phenomenon. Chase T, I agree with you. New metal being a douchebag. I get it, but there was like a mix of punk. And I don't think that it had a lot to do with women, at least in my opinion. New metal, Limp Bizkit, Insane Clown Posse, all that kind of stuff. It was kind of about being so angry that you hated everyone. So I don't think that was, you might be like climbing a dominance hierarchy, but I don't think new metal had much to do with pimping out women. I think a lot of club douchebags, they do focus on women. Anyways.
I completely agree with you, but Andrew, you were shaking your head quite vigorously. Why?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just more feminine or feminist nonsense ultimately. And the covert feminism in society is big, especially on the conservative side. So here's what happens, right? Women need to have feminine virtues for men to be pursuing masculine virtues, for you to say things like, well, men, what I want is for men to protect me and I want men to make money. Well, that's great. What that ends up doing is it gives you a set of privilege in society. What do men get? What do men get for doing that for you? What are we getting from women for doing that? Are we getting chaste virgins on our wedding night? No, we're not getting chaste virgins on our wedding night. Are we getting women of great virtue? No, we're not getting women of great virtue. The idea of courtly love is supposed to be done for women of great virtue. Where are they? Well, they're nowhere. And so in modernity, in society, when female conservative influencers say this, it's actually a form of covert feminism. They're saying, I want privilege in society, right? But what is it women are giving to men to get it? What are they giving them? Tell me.
Well,
can I please chime in here?
Yes, you can. And then James can, and I'll come to you, Sean.
No, I would love to. I love this whole thing of like, if you're a female conservative and you don't believe that men should be douchebags, that all of a sudden you're a covert feminist. Call me a feminist. I really don't give one crap one way or another. But I can tell you this, a lot of these men, these podcast hosts on the right that like to think of themselves as these big masculine men, and what am I getting out of it? I can tell you this.
There's that feminism.
All right, I believe I'm a woman of virtue, right?
Out.
Yeah, there's the feminism. Oh, and then you're interrupting me too,
Didn't
which
take
is great.
long,
I let you talk.
Didn't
It's
take
my
long,
turn.
did it?
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to speak over me?
Yeah, I don't care if you call me. I don't really care if you call me a
strong,
feminist.
independent woman.
Yeah. You're actually interrupting me. I didn't interrupt you when you were spewing your bullshit. So now it's my turn. Okay.
True.
You mean the truth?
Like I said before. So I believe there we go again. Piers, I'm a woman of virtue. I happen to be independently successful. I have a husband who's not only a former professional athlete, but is currently a professional baseball coach. So is he not a masculine man? I mean, I'm confused here. What's your concept of a masculine man? Mine is a man who respects me.
Yeah, that misses the point, though. Like, you're still not contending with the argument that I'm making.
What's your point?
I'm saying inside of society, right this second, right, masculinity is not only punished, but also women on the right, covert feminists on the right, are constantly and consistently talking about how they need to have privilege in society. I want men. Their version of masculinity is men who take care of us, men who protect us, men who do all of this. Those are all duties that men have towards women. Great. What are the duties that women have towards men? What are the duties that women have towards anything? What do men get out of this arrangement? What are we getting out of this arrangement? Can you tell me?
Okay. So I'm going to try. Yeah. So I'm going to deal with what y'all are saying, and then I'm going to say it. My first fight was with a kid wearing a swastika armband. I grew up in Idaho. Jeez, bro. That's kind of crazy. I can't not in this instance. Sorry. Good. Well, you know, we try to consider the information, not just the source, right? Wanting to hook up with virgins is a red flag. It can be. It isn't always. If you were 16 and you were a virgin and you wanted a virgin, I don't think that would be a red flag. Also, if you were a 20-year-old hyper-religious person who was a virgin and you wanted a 20-year-old hyper-religious person in order to marry who was also a virgin, I don't think that would be too bad either. But the truth is that you have to match, right? So if you want a virgin, you should be a virgin. Right? Whatever virtue you're projecting onto your potential partner, you need to be living that as well, right? Silver Jacket Man says, I'd make an off-color joke about Andrew's wife here, but I'm going to take the high road. Well, thank you for that. You know, I enjoy, despite BPF or Andrew, excuse me, despite Andrew and Mrs. Wilson and I always disagreeing on stuff, I do have fun contending with them. Eon Flux says, yeah, you're right, Connor. I can't really point out anything wrong with what she's saying so far. True. Hill.Williams says, I'm surprised nobody has picked up Andrew for having to chain smoke his stress away in debates. Honestly, I think he's just a tobacco addict. They have such dumb terms like covert feminist. Well, you know, Andrew, he's got to put on a show. He's a performer. And so as a result, he needs to trigger other people, get them upset, get them yelling at him. And then that's a good show, right? The more people that you upset, the more people that they get yelled, they get triggered, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't matter whether or not there's actually like substance to the debate. People like train wrecks, right? So if he can get Tomi Lahren to crash out, that's going to be a high viewership video. But Andrew asked this question twice. I'm going to address it because Tomi hasn't yet. I hope she does, and I hope she does it sincerely. So what does a man get if he is willing to protect and to provide for a woman, both like physical security and financial security? Okay. What you should be getting a romantic partner, somebody that you are sexually interested in, who's sexually interested in you, who you have good chemistry with. And oftentimes sexual chemistry is going to be an indication of whether or not you're going to have healthy children. I do think that children are awesome. I think there's a huge and very cool part of life. Secondarily, you should probably be getting a partner. And I don't mean this in a friend way. I mean this in almost like a businessy way. What I mean by that is running a household, getting everybody up on time, getting food for everybody, making sure everybody has sufficient caffeine, my wife and I in particular, making sure that we have enough clothes, making sure that we have enough food for the entire day, lunches and dinners, making sure that all of that is organized, making sure that everybody is doing what they're supposed to do is effectively the job of a project manager. And so what can happen with dual income households is you can split responsibilities down the middle and try to run the project management role as a split income, split partnership. Or what can happen, which I've been very blessed with in the past couple of years, is you can have a single income earner and you can have a single project manager. And so my wife is effectively the household project manager and I'm effectively the income earner. So I still have to help out with some domestic responsibilities and she has to make some financial sacrifices all the time, but we get a partner. Then I would say finally, hopefully you get a friend. Hopefully if you have sexual chemistry and you have the ability to have a good partnership with your wife, then hopefully you also have a friend as well. And what I mean by that is not everything is sex, not everything is money, and not everything is family management. Sometimes you just need to be able to enjoy each other's company. And so that means watching movies together. That means going to the park together. That means getting dinner together. That means talking about things that aren't related to your family or your job or anything else. Sometimes it's just about talking about your hobbies. And so if you can find those in a partner and you're able to be relatively equitable and you're able to raise children together, I would say that women disproportionately bear the household burden and the project management burden and also the childbearing burden. That's what men should be getting out of these relationships. Did I lose you guys?
I mean,
no. Okay, cool. Just want to make sure my internet connection was still good.
You,
Well, I
as I
would
was going to
argue
answer
that
a
men
second ago,
innately
Well,
should
I'll
be
tell you-
I don't want to
protectors
interrupt
and
you.
Hang on one second. Let Tommy
Most men are
respond.
born that
Let
way.
Tommy respond to that, and then I'll come to you, Jez. And then
Yeah,
Sean,
most
you've
men
been
are-
waiting patiently. So
Most men are born to be protectors and providers. I can't imagine my dad saying, you know what, to my mom, you know what, I'm not going to be a protector and a provider unless you do this. That's not how real men operate. Real men are protectors and providers, and they marry women who hopefully
great.
have
A
some
woman telling
virtue,
us what
but
real
also
men
bring a
are
lot to
again.
the
Great.
table as well, that are great mothers, great wives, caretakers of the home. There's nothing wrong with being a traditional wife and mother. You're misunderstanding me if you think that I think that women should just be out doing whatever they want. I think that there
love getting
are gender
lectured by
roles that
women
should
on
be
what real men
respected.
are. That's
But I
great.
don't think a man needs to get something out of it to be a manly man, a protector, and a provider. If you think you
So
need to
nothing.
get
So you
something
should
out
have
of it,
nothing.
I quite frankly don't
So
consider you a
nothing.
real man.
Yeah, Tommy could have done better there. What I would have said is obviously being like a good wife, a good mother, a good partner, a good friend. So that was not my favorite rebuttal.
She have
Okay.
nothing. She have nothing.
But we'll
No women
discuss
have
in a
no
moment
duties,
whether
nothing.
Andrew
They just get
Wilson is a
privilege.
real man.
Piers,
But
Piers,
let's
I
go to-
offer nothing. I offer nothing.
You offer
didn't
me
offer
a
a single
lot of
argument.
things, Tommy. That's why I always love having you on the show. You know that. Let's go to a real man, James Barr.
Thank you. I do see myself as a man, and I know that you'll be looking at me thinking, well, you're not. You're wearing makeup. You're wearing colorful clothes. Like, look at me. I'm really camp. My nails are
Yeah, I
painted.
mean, they are worrying
You know,
signs. I
you're
agree.
sat there smoking a cigarette. I'd love to get a vape out and start drinking a beer. You know, pints with the lads. Just connect with you over that. I think that you have some insane opinions on what women are meant to do for you. It's crazy that you don't appreciate that a woman actually gave birth to you. Like, she gave you a womb for 9 months and then looked after you, I would hope, for the beginning of your life. And you're sat there going, what do women owe men? Women don't owe men anything. No one owes you.
Listen, they're missing the argument. They're missing the argument. So the point is, if men are expected to be protectors and providers, then what will women offer? And he just said that women offered you the gift of life. That is a good argument. Saying that women don't owe you anything, though, is this like twisted, nihilistic, individualistic feminism that I'm sure actually does piss off Andrew Wilson and pisses myself off as well. We are reciprocal and complementary creatures. Okay? We are reciprocal and complementary creatures. That means that in relationships, reciprocity, I give you something, you give me something. We're supposed to find a flow that's an equitable, semi-equitable relationship where we feel like we're both getting a benefit out of knowing each other. Okay. And then complementary means that you do what I can do, or you do what I can't do, and I do what you can't do. But together we form a unit that helps us both get together through life. Okay. So him saying women don't owe you anything, but the context of the conversation being men owe women the protector and provider role, you need to say, no, women are very different and have a variety of things to offer men because not all of them are going to be childbearing. However, stereotypically, women offer the nurturing, childbearing, and household management role. And if you want a traditional relationship, then men should be the protectors and providers, and women should be the nurturers, household managers, and lovers, I guess. I don't mean that explicitly sexually. I mean that like providing the gift of love and care and nurturing. Astronaut Farmer posts either a middle finger or a thumbs up. I don't know which one. And then Wildman542 says, you got to love getting psychic damage from both ideas. God, I love Mondays. True. Listen, we definitely picked our poison today, boys. We definitely picked our poison. Candace Owens hurt us in the beginning, and Tomi Lahren and Andrew Wilson are doing a great job of hurting us now.
Anything. You have your own life.
Do you understand that if you make an argument and you say that
I've
women are
watched
supposed
your
to be
seminar on how to win an
in a
argument.
position, if the women are supposed to be in a position of privilege where men do A, B, C, and D for them, and then I ask, well, what duties do women have? And you say, well, nothing.
No one said
right?
that
And then you
men
wonder,
need.
why are men
Personally,
checking out? I don't know why men are checking out. I don't get it.
You just
That's
sound
silly,
so funny.
man.
All right,
That's
let
a
me bring
silly
in.
argument.
All right, let me bring in the one person who so far hasn't said a word about this. Has a lot of interesting things to say. Sean, welcome to Uncensored. I mean, I think one of the key things of this series that's made it so popular is that anyone who's had young sons knows that they are, if you're not careful, they get exposed to a lot of nasty stuff on the internet. We all know this. And a lot of it is this kind of incel stuff, which I think can be a really malevolent influence on impressionable young men. And they gravitate to it. And I think that partly what Andrew's getting at, I agree with, in the sense that following the Me Too Time's Up campaigns, which were in many ways, extremely laudable, brought down a lot of very bad men, no question of that. But they also, the pendulum swung so wildly that I think a lot of young men in particular felt completely disenfranchised from society, felt like they're all being treated like a bunch of young Harvey Weinsteins, unless they could prove otherwise. They didn't really know what the rules of engagement were with women, with teenage girls anymore, whatever. They lost their way. And by losing their way, they gravitated, I think, to very loud voices on the internet like Andrew Tate, who I think, like I say, he says a lot of stuff I find myself nodding to, and then he'll say this misogynist stuff, which I just despise it. I see no reason why you should ever want to have a relationship with a woman the way that Andrew Tate wants you to, where it's just pure misogyny. Just talk to me first of all about why you think young boys, teenage boys, young men, why they've gravitated to people like Tate.
Wick is going on Tim Pool,
thanks.
very base,
Yeah,
John.
so I think it's, first of all, we got to understand that we have an amazing responsibility as a parent to lead from the home and to have these open conversations with our young children. All right, whether they're male children, female children, we have to make sure that we're having open door conversations and we are tackling the hard subjects. Because if we don't take care of everything at home, we don't take care of everything in public, like at school, and other forces within society that help raise our children, we always say it takes a village. Well, it certainly does, but it starts at home. And if you cannot have these open conversations and allow your children to be honest and open with how they are feeling about society and the things that they are seeing, they are going to go to misogyny. They're going to go to the Andrew and Tristan Tates of the world, and they're going to learn how to be a man from that. And that is not what society needs. It's not what the world needs. That is not masculinity. It is masquerading as misogyny.
All right, this isn't going to work either. Okay. We can do it, chat. We can do it. We got this. I haven't had a stroke yet. My neurons haven't fried yet. I'm not dead yet. Let's see if we can do with this, okay? So Sean says men need to lead from the home. I agree, okay? Open door conversations and taking on the hard subjects. We don't take care of it at home and school, then toxic cultures can take over. This is good. I'm 100% good with everything. But this is where I get into a fight with conservatives, okay? In the 1980s, I think it was called fusion politics. Somebody can correct me. But Reaganism was a combination of social conservatism and fiscal conservatism and neoconservatism. And so what that means is social conservatism was a strong Christian core with Christian morality and espousing like a cultural Christian hegemonic dominance in American domestic society. That's what I mean by social conservatism. When it comes to fiscal conservatism, no offense to Reaganites, but it was chopping up the social safety net and letting schizophrenics die by the tens of thousands and AIDS people die by the tens of thousands because they weren't social conservatives and they weren't fiscal conservatives. So they reap what they have sown. I'm not saying that is good. I'm saying that that's the way that they classified the AIDS pandemic and homeless people dying on the street was they were like, okay, well, these are bad actors in our society. So if they catch diseases and die, then that's their own. Quick, call the tech priest. Connor needs it. What, did my internet get knocked out? I'm still good on my side. I don't know what's going on with you guys. But anyways, I'll just keep going as if I'm still live, even if we got an issue. But the point is that fiscal conservatism and social conservatism got married up, and then also neocons, which are liberals who moved over to the conservative side because they felt like the left had gone too far. They joined in order to make an alliance that dominated culture for the past 20 or 30 years. Well, the problem is that fiscal conservatism, not wanting to spend any money on social spending, that's actually what we debated in the libertarian debate with Fabian Liberty. It's so bad that conservatives will tell young working men that they need to work 60 hours a week and never see their families in order to bust ass and get by, and that's just their job. And guess what? Men don't want to work 60 hours a week, busting their backs, busting their bones, if they're not going to have a family, if they're not going to be able to afford a decent life, if they're not going to see any long-term, if they don't have savings, if they don't have medical, if they don't have dental, if they can't afford any toys, man toys, if they can't afford a vacation, if they can't afford a family. And so as a result, you have men checking out of society. So I want to go back to the fiscal and social conservatives, and I want to say, we cut enough. The Reagan cuts were enough in order to get, like, whatever you want to call it, the toxic shit out of our stuff. And instead of eliminating the central government, instead of eliminating federal spending, we instead need to take that money and we need to spend it smarter in order to promote a healthy society. So far, I have not gotten a single person to believe me yet that if you want a conservative society, you need to invest in the next generation. They all seem to have like a boomer mentality of like, I got mine and I'm successful, so screw everyone else. So we'll see if I can get some messaging through to actually sane people.
How do we protect young men from the easy access at the moment there is to people like Tate? I mean, how do you actually put a ring fence around them so that you can tackle exactly what you've just said, but they're not also being dragged into that world?
It's tough because they're growing up in a world we never grew up in, Piers. We didn't grow up with the internet. We didn't grow up with Bumble, Tinder, Instagram, Facebook.
No, I was taught how to treat women by my mother, my grandmother.
Open the door, right?
Aunts,
Open the door.
A lot of strong women in my family, very strong women. And they would just take no crap from the men. So that's the environment I grew up in.
Absolutely. So how do we insulate our children from this? By having conversations, putting parameters around the social media aspects of life and having the conversations at home. Hey, son, hey, daughter, this is what you're going to see out there in the real world. This is what you're going to see on the internet. If you see something like this, that is not how a true man is supposed to act. And hey, that's not how a real man's supposed to treat you.
Right. So
we have to have the conversations.
Yeah. Andrew, do you intrinsically disagree with what you've just heard?
Yeah, I do. I think, again, all of this is always the burden on men, burden on men, burden on men. Men need to be doing this. No, it's a family,
Andrew. The family.
Hang on. Let me finish,
family,
man.
Andrew.
Men need to,
husband and wife.
Okay, yeah. So let me back up. Okay, again, men need to do this. Men need to do that. What I'm talking about is what duties do women have in society? What are the actual women's duties towards men? Everybody is raised from the time they're kids how we're supposed to treat women. We all know how to treat women. We never talk about how men are supposed to be treated. That's almost never discussed, especially by how women are supposed to treat men, what their duties in society are. This has been completely dispelled. Guys like Tate have risen because Christianity itself has become a feminized religion, especially the Protestant sects has become completely feminized. And it didn't used to punish masculinity at all. And now it does. And so where's the alternative? Where's the spiritual alternative? It's nowhere. And we need to get back to this fundamental question of what even is misogyny? Because I don't think that men kicking the crap out of each other, being brutes, insulting each other, hazing each other, even bullying each other is misogyny. Not only do I not think it's misogyny, I think it's perfectly healthy.
Yeah, but I don't think that's misogyny.
Well-adjusted.
Is that the argument?
But that is not misogyny.
Well, no. Hang on.
Hang on.
Women see this is
misogyny is where you have a
Andrew Wilson just told a multi-millionaire host that he's on the program with. He told him to hold on for a second. I love the thing. Andrew just assumes stuff. It's that's funny. I would never have the balls to be on somebody else's show and be like, hold on a second, I want to finish my point. I might say, excuse me, I'd like to finish my point, but I don't think I would ever tell the host to buzz off. So what's interesting, one of the things that I took a note on was that, I think Tomi was nodding. I think Sean said this. I think Pierce might have said it as well, that they had tough women in their lives. And that's true of me as well. My mother, God bless her, she's a truly tough woman. What I mean by that is she raised 3 boys. She worked while she was raising the 3 boys. She had a pretty stern sense of discipline. She had a really good instinct for disciplining the family when it came to economics. She was able to reel my father in, and God bless them, they've been married for more than 50 years, right? So I feel like she set, while, no one's perfect, her and my father set a pretty good example of like a respectful, monogamous, standard Christian relationship. And obviously they have things that they could work on, but I knew that I couldn't give my mother any flack. And so as a result of her having that tough, disciplinary, I would say it's ethnically Irish attitude, I kind of knew that I needed a tough lady in order to marry, and I got one. My wife Victoria, she's a very pretty, feminine woman, but she doesn't take crap from me at all. And sometimes you need to be reeled in. So that's where I think that it's not frustrating yet, but it could be frustrating, is that Andrew returns to what are the duties of a woman within a relationship. And so obviously when you're talking about dating, that's different than marriage. So I think we need to talk about marriage. And then I think we need to talk about marriage with children. When it comes to dating, I think it's probably sexual loyalty, being a good friend, and maybe being a good partner. I think that's probably the best thing. When it comes to marriage, that comes with the household and the children responsibilities. So I would return to those, but I think that Andrew is catching these people flat-footed because they don't want to give an answer besides the feminist answer, which is funny because that means that Andrew is actually pointing to a real problem. Okay. So if he asks, what are women's duties, and no one answers again, I would actually see that as Andrew pointing to a real problem.
Hatred, or whatever you want to phrase it, towards women. It's not about men treating men.
Sorry, toxic masculinity is what I'm referencing here, and toxic masculinity is what they're claiming leads to misogyny. So what I'm talking about is these are all masculine traits. There's nothing wrong with them, right? When you're talking about misogyny itself, I want to know what that even is. Is it just asserting yourself to women, telling women no, telling them no, that's bullshit?
No, I would say it's okay. Let me
telling
answer
them you're saying stupid things.
Andrew Tate says he's quite open about it. Women should stay at home. They shouldn't go out to work. They should do what he tells them. He's the king of the castle in his house. Blah 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 blah. That is misogyny, isn't it? I've got a daughter. I've got a 13-year-old daughter. I don't want her thinking she can never leave the house. She's somebody's chattel.
It's not never leaving the house. Look, it is true that the world would be a better place if we didn't have it inverted, and women did have a natural role at home, and that was glorified, and that there was government propaganda around the nuclear family and keeping women home. Why do you want to outsource the raising of children to strangers instead of your wife? That's a way better society. Why do you want your best and brightest women forced to go to a workplace instead of the best and brightest women staying at home raising their children? That's a way better system. It's always been a better system.
I guess we're talking freedom of choice.
That's not misogyny.
Women to do anything. It's freedom of choice. It's freedom of choice. I love the fact that my wife's out there working, teaching kids and building adolescents. I love that. And to your point about what do I get from a woman? I have a home. I have 3 beautiful children. I have communication in the house. And to me, that means more than anything.
We'll be live
I
until
don't
5.
understand where I'm not saying you're wrong in your world, but to to sit there and say to a woman, what do I get out of this woman? That's treating her like an object.
One thing I want to play a clip.
Okay, so it's okay to treat men like objects, give them duties,
I
but
don't
you're not
feel
allowed
like
to
an
give
object.
women duties.
I feel respected.
Okay,
in
well,
my
let me
home.
ask you this.
I'm not
How
angry
come it is
about
in the
it.
United States that men can be drafted? Women can't be drafted, but women can vote to send men to war. 18 years old, they're stabbing each other in the face with bayonets. Women can vote to send men to war that they then themselves do not have to fight. It's a duty that men have, they do not have. What's the counter duty for women? There's no obligation for women
Childbearing.
to have children. We're well under replacement rate. It's slated 45% of women will be single in the next 10 years, up to 60% in the next 30. That's the estimates right now. Our replacement rate, we can't even replace our own country's birth rates. That's how low they are.
Maybe
This is what we're seeing
people
as a
like you that's
systemic,
causing the
as
problem.
a systemic issue inside of society because nobody will put duties on women.
Go on,
Instead,
James.
you just
Maybe it's
pretend
men like
have
you
all
that
the
are
duty.
making that
Maybe that's why
happen.
the
Maybe you're
replacement
the
rate
problem.
rate is low.
Yeah,
Women don't
It's
men are the
crazy to me
problem.
as well that
Exactly.
you are
There
just
we go
sat
again.
here
Men
being
are
Don't
the
talk
problem.
over each other. Let James speak.
I can't understand why you are sat there confidently thinking of yourself as a victim constantly. You have a platform and you're sat here like, I'm a victim. What are women doing for me? What happened in your childhood that has made you so traumatized as an adult that
yay,
you
feminine
cannot stand
psychoanalysis.
women succeeding? I'm so confused. I feel like the
Lord.
problem is not, and actually maybe this is our fault. Maybe this is the left's fault. Maybe this is modern society's
Right.
fault for leaving people like you behind. But genuinely, we do not hate men, and toxic masculinity has been thrown around a lot. Ultimately, some of what you're saying is toxic, but that's not because you're a man. That's because you're an idiot.
All right.
Okay.
Aw, that was almost a comeback. That was almost a comeback. Let's give him a little golf clap. That was almost an insult. I guarantee you Andrew did not feel that though. That was like a wet kiss to the cheek for Andrew Wilson. He is used to far worse words being thrown at him. So Pierce contends that Andrew Tate wants his women to stay at home, not work, do what he tells them. It's not entirely true. He wants them to stay home so they're socially isolated so he can pimp them out on webcam and then for them not to talk back to him. I do think that's misogynist, meaning that it does hate women. It does put women in a lower level of position of power. I think that there's some women who might enjoy that lower position of power, but it should be a purely voluntary relationship. So if Andrew Tate was a dominant in like the BDSM style of psychology, and then he found a bunch of like a submissive or a couple submissives who were willing to live with him and live that kind of lifestyle, then good for him. I wouldn't care. The reason why I do care is because he's beaten multiple women. He's admitted to psychologically manipulating multiple women. He's admitted to psychologically manipulating multiple women into sex work in a different country away from their friends and family. And therefore he's been credibly accused of rape and physical assault. So he beats women, he sex traffics women, and he's allegedly raped women with strong evidence pointing to the fact that he's actually done that. So that's why I would object to Andrew Tate. I wouldn't object to those other things as long as it was consensual. So I do agree with Andrew. You don't have to agree with me, but I do agree with Andrew that my wife and I, the reason why we decided for her to stay home is, number one, we can afford it so far. And then number two, we want to be present for the lives of our children, especially when they're young. It's such a small window. The window of 0 to 5, when your children are truly, truly, truly like babies and toddlers and then children, is such a small window that we wanted to be there and soak up as much of the magic as possible. And so as a result, she was able to stay home, and we, there's been some tight months, let's put it that way. But we've been able to make it work. So Andrew was asking, what was the responsibility that men are responsible for war, right? 99% of men do not participate in war. And out of the 99%, or out of the 100% that do, let's eliminate 99% of the population. Let's go down to that 1%. Out of the 99 that do, most of them, the one that do, I'm so bad at this. Sorry, 1 second. 99% of men within the United States do not participate in war. Out of the people who do participate in war, only like 2% of them are infantrymen or combat arms. And so 98% of people who do armed service, they don't even do infantry or combat. Okay. So that means that like a percentage of a percentage are actual infantry and combat arms, and everybody else is logistics. Okay. Now, that being said, this is still a sacrifice that we're asking men to be willing to make in our society. So what is the equivalent? And what I would say is a lot of women, a heck of a lot of women, take on child rearing either voluntarily or non-voluntarily, where, you know, sometimes they're single moms, sometimes they're part of two-parent households. And so I would see that these not as equivalent sacrifices, but as similar sacrifices that are very intense to the individual. Being in the military, speaking as a veteran, was an incredibly intense experience that had a lot of hard lessons and pain. I would say that watching my wife go through childbirth twice also came with a lot of hard lessons and pain. And so to pretend that this is not you can criticize our society not having more partnerships and not having enough children. I think that's a different argument as to whether or not women actually do have some like sacrificial role in society. So yap. I'm getting tired, so I'm going a little crazy with it. My apologies, but my brain is starting to get cooked as the day wears on. Let's somebody else cook.
Okay, so just to give you a quick rejoinder here, again, didn't contend with a single argument I made. You just said, why are you acting like a victim? While you're here talking about how women are
You're not
victims.
contending with arguments that other people
It's
make.
wild to me. It's so wild to me.
You know,
All right, I want to play
Piers' show.
Let me play another clip.
I know this is Piers' show.
Let me go to Tommy. Tommy, I want to play you a clip. This is from a show called Newsnight on the BBC in the UK, where the host Victoria Derbyshire had a panel of young men on and asked them, when was the last time you cried? Let's watch this.
When was the last time you cried?
Honestly, the last time I cried, I couldn't tell you.
Same with Leo. I can't really remember the last time that I cried fully.
A lot of times I feel emotion and I look at myself, why can't I cry? We're told to suppress our emotions.
I feel like to guys, we may be treated a certain way that evokes an idea that we have to be extremely strong and upfront and here as a man, and I'm going to be composed at all times.
Now, I've got a slight issue with this, Tommy, in the sense that one of the most devastating moments for me as a movie watcher was watching James Bond blubbing in the last Bond movie. Right? I don't think to prove you're a modern man, you need to be sobbing all the time. You know, I can't remember the last time I cried. It doesn't make me less of a man or less empathetic to people or anything. I just think again, the pendulum issue of what we want men to be. I think we're now trying to persuade a lot of young men, if you're not emoting all the time, then you're being suppressed in some way. We
that's
have
not the direction
here
I thought they would
the
go.
British
That's
stiff upper
interesting.
lip, which I think is a really bad rap. I think it's not a bad thing to actually not over-emote. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think
Yeah,
it's.
I'm
Oh,
sure I agree
sorry,
with
Sean.
you.
I'll come
So,
to you. That was
listen-
that was for Tommy. I'll come to you in a minute, Sean.
Oh, sorry, Tom.
For Tommy.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all, Piers. I don't think that men should be trained to be overly emotional and that should be a sign now of new maturity, being emotional. I don't agree with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with men crying in certain circumstances. Listen, everybody has a different journey. Everybody has a different set of circumstances. There are circumstances wherein men crying, I have no issue with. It's also not up to me to tell a man when he can or cannot cry. I personally prefer the men in my life not to be overly emotional, but that's just a personal preference. Really, who am I to tell a man how he should exhibit his emotions? But again, I think that there is two sides here that are both too extreme. You've got the one hand that wants men to be feminine and cry and show their emotion and be weak. And then you've got the other side that says you cannot cry. You must always be strong and you should look at women as an object. So again, there's got to be a happy medium here. I think there once was, but now because of, again, I agree, there was an overreaction of the feminist movement to make men weak. I don't agree with that either.
Yeah.
I just wish we could come to a place where there was a happy medium where people could just be human beings who could have a gender role, but weren't married to that gender role in absoluteness. There's got to be a place for that. I would certainly hope.
Yeah. Andrew Wilson, when was the last time you cried?
When I had a death in my family.
And how long ago was that, if you don't mind me asking?
Many years. Many years. I don't know, maybe a decade, something like that.
Right. So you haven't shed a tear in a decade.
I don't think so. No.
Would you see it inherently as a weakness in a man to over-emote?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Men, listen, you don't want men to fall to pieces in crisis. You're the head of a family. You're the head of your household. And also you're the heads of nations. You have a moral obligation not to fall to pieces. In fact, I would say you're duty bound not to. You need to be able to control your emotions, and you need to be able to attempt to control them at all times. It's not to say that you're not going to lose control. Nobody's perfect. But I think that the idea of the stoic man is a much better prospect for the idea of like this leftist that I'm arguing with next to me on the panel. I would not want to be that guy, that person who just cannot control their internal emotions. They can't do it. And unfortunately, again, this is through the viewpoint of the feminine prism that it's only through empathy, right? Empathy first. And it's like, no, it's not always about empathy. It's also about reason. It's also about logic. It's also about understanding that we live in a carnal world full of warring tribes who are always killing each other. And that's part of the human condition. You can't afford to have your men losing control to emotion or to empathy.
James, when was the last time you didn't cry on a date? Let's flip the question around.
I haven't cried today, but I did cry yesterday, and I think it's okay to cry. And it's funny that you keep trying to goad me and saying that I don't have control of my emotions. I think I have incredible control over my emotions because.
All right. Eon Flux says, Connor, I have a question, but it's not related to this. Go ahead. Hit me with it. So, can't remember crying. So I'm trying to think. I think the last time I have man tears. Okay. I think I probably cry more than I'll admit, but it's watching a movie, right? It's like watching a TV show. And then there's a character that you or like a book. And there's a character that you come to know and love, and they have this like beautiful self-sacrificial send-off where they're making the hard choice in order to die to save like their family, their tribe, their whatever. I think that like I'm still staring at the screen, right? Like I don't, my face doesn't change, but I have tears collect at the corners of my eyes, and then it just kind of goes out. And I think it's because it reminds me of like real things. Like I think it reminds me of real people I know who sacrificed themselves for the greater good or died in a tragic way or something like that. And so the emotion from a narrative will remind me of a real trauma. And I'll cry man tears. My face won't change, but my a single tear, like the Native American watching a piece of trash be thrown out on the highway. That's the way that I cry when engaging with media. However, I wrote these down kind of as a joke, but I'm also serious. So I love dogs. Dogs have been a huge part of my life as long as I can remember. I wanted a dog since I was like, 3, and I didn't get one until I was 8. She lived to be 16. And so I lost her in my mid to late 20s, and I fell apart because I loved her. Same thing with losing family members like grandparents. I'm very lucky. I still have both of my parents. And they're, despite having some health issues, they're still here with us. I'm sure I'll cry when my parents die. 100%. I'll lose it. I'll drink. I'll cry. I'll tear my clothing. Irish people are very expressive human beings. So I'm sure I'll, cry when my parents die. Then in the shower, I think that if you're going through a breakup, if you're having a bad day, if everything's overwhelming, if you're falling apart, I think it's okay to cry in the shower. No one else is around, et cetera, et cetera. Punching the car steering wheel. I brought this up kind of as a joke, but when I was 19, going through a breakup, joining the Marine Corps, all that kind of stuff, and I was in the car, no one else was around, and I just kind of fell apart temporarily. That was a moment. And what Andrew said that I think is actually correct is that you're duty bound to not fall apart. That's the part that I actually think is important. I don't think it's the crying. The crying isn't the problem, right? If you cry over a dog dying, a family member dying, in the shower, over a breakup when you're young, that kind of thing, I think those are perfectly fine times to cry. But duty bound to not fall apart, you still have a job to do. You still need to work. You still need to take care of your family members. You still need to take care of the people that are reliant on you. You still need to improve your life. You still need to do this. You still need to do that. So falling apart is not the problem. It's you need to, after you fall apart, in my opinion, you need to be able to pick yourself back up and keep pressing, right? That's my opinion. So I can't really think of other examples. I think that's the best thing. Those are the best examples that I can think of. And I don't think crying is the problem. I think it's falling apart that's the problem. You can fall apart temporarily, but then you need to get it together and you need to keep pushing. So reading these, the Silver Jacket Man, I did the man cry during the end of Godzilla -1 last night. Awesome. It'd be so true. So true. If there's like a self-sacrificial moment or like a tragic death or a tragic irony, 100%. I'm with you. Eon Flex has already posted it, but I'll ask again. Looks like your administrator is gearing up for war with Iran. You think it's only posturing? No idea. I'm not predicting anything at this point. What do we have? We got a bunch of B-2 bombers line up at Diego Garcia with a bunch of fuel tankers, which is our capacity to strike targets on the other side of the planet. And apparently we have like, I don't know, the most amount of B-2 bombers at this one base that's in recorded history, in recent recorded history. And so I'm not going to be surprised if they do it. I'm not going to be surprised if they don't do it. Anything is possible right now. Jonah Boy says the only movie that made me cry is Godzilla versus Destroyer. When I was 5, first Godzilla Jr. died, then Godzilla died, resurrecting his son. I still get watery eyes. Yes, the self-sacrificial noble death. So true. I think it's funny that we have so many Godzilla, so many tears over monster movies, but that's funny. John, I cried watching One Piece. A crew of friends who were dying played a song until one by one they all died. The last one was the only survivor. Very heart-wrenching when my brother died. So John, I'm sorry to hear that your brother passed, but there's an interesting thing. So there's a TV show called The Expanse, and it can be corny sometimes, but there's 2 scenes that made me do man cries. One of them was a belter, right? So she's an asteroid colonist, and she chooses to die with her people in order to save another few souls, right? She chooses to effectively like throw herself on the wrong side of an airlock in order to get as many civilians evacuated from a deadly scenario as possible. And then the other one that made me cry, man cry, right? My face didn't move, just single tear going down the right side of my face, was there was a space pirate who fought another space pirate and lost. And then he faced being airlocked. He was getting thrown into space. He knew he was going to die. He faced it by singing like a really sad pirate song. And I thought it was just like this beautifully tragic moment. But anyways, we'll move on from the crying stuff. I just wanted to share my experience. The Silver Jacket Man. My biggest cry was when my dad died. Yep, that makes sense. Not when he died weirdly, but he had this big sweet Rottweiler and nobody in the family could take it. When I took the dog to the adoption service, I lost it after. Yeah, dude, that would make me fall apart 100%. Yep. Eon Flux says, and 2 carrier strike groups. Hey, listen, Iran, I'm sure they could kill a few thousand American service members in the Middle East and North Africa. I'm sure that they could sink a carrier or 2. I'm sure that they could even maybe get a missile or 2 off that wouldn't be intercepted, that might kill a few thousand, or, let's say they did a nuclear armed weapon, a few 100,000 people in the United States. But I think that their technology is so unreliable. Maybe this is false confidence, but I think their technology is so unreliable that the vast majority of their stuff would get intercepted, and maybe we would lose like a city or something. But then if we lost a city of a few 100,000, we would turn Iran to glass. Now, maybe we wouldn't bomb civilian centers, but effectively every single piece of infrastructure and government building and security forces building would be turned to glass. So, peace through mutually assured destruction is something very real and dear to my heart.
Because I know what's upsetting me and when, and I'm able to talk about it.
Well, how often do you cry?
I mean, not all the time, but
every day?
No, not every day, Piers. I cried
2 or 3
yesterday.
times
I
a
probably
week?
haven't cried for about 3 weeks before that. But honestly, my therapist tells me I need to cry, and it's a good relief.
But the point being, Andrew hasn't cried in 10 years.
I think that is such a weakness, Andrew, that you haven't cried in a decade. Like, that's crazy to me.
Told me I could cry.
I'm so worried about you. I can't understand. Well, you're crying now. I'm pleased I happily facilitated that for you.
I think we're seeing the two extremes that Tommy was talking about.
It's honestly, yeah, Tommy, you're so right. There's no nuance. I mean, it's difficult to have nuance on this show anyway, but we do need to find some in this debate.
I think the point is men should not feel they can never emote, but also they shouldn't be encouraged to believe if they're not constantly emoting, there's something wrong with them.
Well, of course, but also
that's where the pendulum's just gone too far.
You are also sort of guilty of this manosphere, Piers. You're very much in the manosphere yourself.
What do you think that means?
Well, it means that you think James Bond shouldn't cry, and that if he does, that's a weakness.
I want James Bond to be. I want him to seduce women,
which he
does.
I
want him to be a ruthless, steely-eyed dealer of death to bad guys.
But also,
I want him to have a cigarette with his whiskey or his shaken not stirred martini.
Maybe Andrew is your type.
And I don't want him sobbing like a baby all the time. I don't.
Like Tommy might not.
Because guess what? When you're in Her Majesty's Secret Service, you don't have time to cry all the time.
Very sad news about Her Majesty, Piers. Sadly, she did pass away, and I'm sure you cried at that, which is completely
His Majesty
right.
now, obviously.
Tommy,
actually, the last Bond film was under Her Majesty, so I was correct.
Fine.
So Chase T says it's good to feel a range and depth of emotion control is important, but there's a place for intensity depending on personality. Yeah. So I did want to share that. Thank you for bringing that up. So the depth, Greeks would actually think that the stunted masculine emotional range of rage or numbness would be a sign of emotional retardation. And so I kind of agree with them a little bit. It took a while until after I left military service and law enforcement service to experience a different emotion besides like rage or numbness. And so, but as it comes back, I think it makes it even sweeter. So happiness, contentment, purpose, joy, all these emotions, they become richer after you kind of go through the gauntlet of becoming a man, I guess. And I'm going to encourage my sons, obviously, to not limit themselves exclusively to the emotions of rage or numbness. I think that men are way too often limited into just anger or apathy. Christian Blair says, I heard the next James Bond was Aaron Taylor Johnson. Not sure how I feel about that. If he's British, that could be okay. Henry Cavill would be my pick, obviously. He did a phenomenal job in Mission Impossible. He has the right aesthetic. He has the right jawline. He looks great in a tuxedo. He knows how to carry himself in action scenes. He already has action doubles. Obviously, I want him for Games Workshop and Warhammer 40K products, but realistically, he would be a phenomenal James Bond. Henry's too old. I agree, and I don't. If he's in his 40s or whatever, you could still do stunts into your 50s. I think Daniel Craig probably started when he was in his late 30s, early 40s. Yeah, maybe. You guys are saying he's too well known. Maybe. Yeah. He could play a James Bond a decade into his career. I think that would be fine. But yeah, if they pick a young gun, that's fine. But then I feel like they need to do the origin. They need to reset the origin story again, where it's him learning the ropes and how to be a spy and getting acquainted with the technology and infiltrating these organizations that are nefarious, that manipulate the entire world and all that kind of stuff. No other British young actor comes to mind. Yeah. I'll think about it. But just sharing. I'm not cutting y'all off, but we are 20 minutes away from the wrap up of the day, so we're going to enjoy a little bit more of this. And actually, you know what? I think we get the point. I think I'm just going to talk to chat. We get the point. Andrew Wilson is toxically masculine. This guy is toxically feminine. No offense. Tomi Lahren is absolutely correct, but she needs to be able to answer the question, what are women's, if men have duties to protect and provide to women, women need to be able to answer the question, what are their duties to men? And I would say that, as I answered previously, it's when you're dating, it's to be a good and loving partner. When you're married, it's probably to be a good, loving partner and friend and lover. And then when you got kids, it's to be a good, loving friend partner, lover, and partner in the sense that you're helping to manage the household. That's what I would say. So Tomi Lahren needs to shore up some of her thoughts on feminism. But besides that, I think we're Gucci. Let me go full screen and yap with chat real quick.